SpongeBob SquarePants! Again! If you're an average cartoon enjoyer, chances are you like SpongeBob SquarePants. Sure, this TV show can sometimes be annoyingly silly and even downright stupid at times, but I think everyone can agree there's some redeeming qualities here. But that's not to say this goofy little cartoon doesn't come with its fair share of controversy. Listen, you can avoid its newest episodes, you can pretend anything after the first movie doesn't exist, but every now and then, there comes a moment so bad, so horrendous, that it's impossible to ignore. In my last SpongeBob video, I covered the lowest rated episodes ever, but even then, I got like a bajillion comments about 2 different episodes, with people commenting things like, it's so goddamn disgusting, and one of the most horribly written episodes SpongeBob ever produced. Alright. You got me intrigued. So today, I'll be trusting the viewers and taking a look at the 2 most hated SpongeBob episodes in full for the first time to see if they're really that bad. Like worse than a pal for Gary? Are you sure? I don't know about that one. That one's pretty bad. Anyway, I'm gonna quit stalling the intro, so go ahead and grab your copy of Super Mario... The fucking Buster Sword! I just got this thing. I wanted to show it off. Pretty cool, right? Well, without further ado, let's jump into what some call the most hated SpongeBob episode of all time. This first episode is probably the least disturbing of the 2. It's called Ink Lemonade. And if you've seen this episode before, you know why people hate it. We begin our adventure with Patrick being a goofball. He's selling lemonade? So close. At the same time, Squidward comes out holding a garbage bag. The 2 talk for a bit. Patrick is really stupid. Squidward is really grouchy. It's a fun time. In my last SpongeBob video, Patrick and Squidward just weren't there, so this is actually kind of hype, especially Squidward. He's the best. Anyway, Patrick tries to get Squidward to drink some lemonade, but because Squidward isn't colorblind, he notices it's just regular water.
You should be hidden under your rock like the hideous freak you are. Do you even have a
okay, Squidward. Bro woke up and he chose violence. That's crazy. Not to worry though, because luckily for Patrick, the garbage bag that Squidward was about to throw out is full of lemons, apparently. Maybe he just really likes lemon cake. I don't know. Anyway, this is obviously not intended to be helpful since the lemon came from the garbage and is all squished and stuff. And it's here where we get the first of this episode's gross scenes. If you're not abnormally queasy to visual stuff, you'll probably be fine. But huge disclaimer, this is kind of gross. Patrick notices the broken lemon, so we get one of those hyper-realistic shots where he takes off a used band-aid from his hairy armpit and then puts it on the lemon. That thing is basically good as new now. Good job. Everyone's seen these kind of shots before. Not sure how they became a thing. Not sure who thought it was a good idea, but here we are. Of course, Patrick puts the still broken lemon and the used band-aid into the jug of water, and then almost immediately some random fish we've never seen before is like, yep, I'll take it. I'm drinking this right now. But then the fish quickly realizes what he just drank and gets very sick. But it's not all bad though, because at least this way Patrick gets his band-aid back.
Sorry, that's not included.
I'm gonna be sick!
This fish dude goes to Squidward's house to puke, because why not? Later on, there actually is this really funny scene where because Patrick is out of water, he tries to squeeze liquid out of a toy truck. Squidward says that'll never work, but of course, it does. Like, you've probably heard of microplastics before, but this is just straight up plastic juice. And just like that, I know every American within a 30-mile radius of this thing is lining up to take a sip. Anyway, SpongeBob finally shows up, and it's in the most SpongeBob-like way imaginable, which is by screaming and just being really annoying. Seriously, you'd probably think that I kind of hate SpongeBob the way that I talk about him sometimes, but I promise you, this thing is like one of my all-time favorite shows ever. The thing is, the great SpongeBob episodes are really, really good, but the bad SpongeBob episodes are extremely bad. Like, creatively bankrupt. They just gave a pen and paper to a monkey or something. I don't know. They didn't care. So SpongeBob shows up, and because he's yelling right next to him, Squidward gets really scared and shoots out a bunch of ink into the jug of water. This is a little gross, I guess, because Squid's inking seems kind of dirty in a weird way, but I think people actually do put ink in their food sometimes. Honestly, I have no idea. Do people consume squid ink? I don't, let me know. I'm too lazy to Google it. What does make me feel a little weird is how Squidward reacts to inking. He seems visibly worried or at least embarrassed, which I know in the lore of SpongeBob, Squidward's like the guy you're supposed to hate or whatever, but I can't help but to feel bad for him here. I don't know. SpongeBob decides to drink the ink right away because I guess he's got nothing better to do. That's the second thing in this episode that he has in common with Valorant players. And then of course another fish shows up and asks for a glass of the black lemonade, and wouldn't you know it, this fish loves it. Apparently this stuff is like crack. I like the jazz in the background. Hold up. The jazz goes hard, but what is going on? So now the boys have the new biggest trend in all of Bikini Bottom, black lemonade. The only problem is they don't have any ink left to make it. However, will they get more, I wonder? Let's find out. The next shot is Patrick asking Squidward for more ink, but when he declines, Patrick realizes the only way to get what he wants is to take it by force. Or in this case, just scare Squidward so bad that he shoots ink out of his nose as a natural reflex. You know, if nothing else comes from this episode, at least they found a creative way to use actual marine biology to serve its plot. One big clap for that one, person who isn't Steven Hillenburg. Anyway, that's the plot now. Patrick just tries to scare Squidward the whole episode. I'm not even kidding here, he just rips his own skin off because it's shocking, I guess. To be honest, if I saw this in front of my door, I'd probably collapse on the spot. So Patrick got the goods, but because the lemonade stand is starting to gain some traction, the boys are gonna need a lot more ink and fast. This is basically Nickelodeon's version of a crypto scam, by the way. They're just lying to people and making millions off it. It's all very cool.
Lapse in my judgment.
Patrick then gets a giant spider to enter Squidward's house to scare the bejesus out of him. Squidward gets scared and snorts out more ink, but there's a much bigger line now, so Patrick needs to get more. It's this next sequence that makes this one of the most hated episodes ever, at least in my opinion. We see Squidward hiding all over the house, looking terrified. Everything is trash and covered in ink, which, like, Patrick, just grab that stuff. You know, it's like, it's already there. There's a bunch of it. Squidward gets a knock on the door, but when he opens it and checks it out, he gets locked out of his own house and enters this weird cabin thing that I need to remind you, Patrick built because he wants ink. Surely he could have just bought some at the nearest bargain mart, but okay. Anyway, everything that happens in this cabin is really scary. There's a bunch of references to actual good movies. How quirky. 2 gallons of ink later, and Squidward ends up at the entrance of an almost identical Krusty Krab, and alongside that, he finds a newspaper that's dated 60 years into the future. He goes inside the building to find a puppet of himself still working at the restaurant and asking for his order. The idea here is that he's literally looking at a future version of himself and will be stuck working at the Krusty Krab forever. He will never accomplish his dreams. He will never find peace and solace. He will forever live out his greatest nightmare, which is to never be happy and to never gain the confidence needed to leave the job he hates working at every single day. A little deep for a kid's show, honestly, but alright, so Squidward is just drenching this puppet in ink, right? Obviously this episode sucks because it ranges from a little gross to borderline unwatchable, depending on who you ask, but it's also straight up just a Squidward torture episode now. Did we learn nothing from the last video, guys? Come on, stop torturing people who just want to be alone, okay? They don't deserve it. Anyway, the line for the lemonade stand got even bigger, if you can imagine that. Must be a boring day at the bottom of the ocean.
You mean you people actually drink this?
Yeah, Squidward's like, you guys know what this shit is, right? But then, in a clever twist, Squidward realizes what's going on, so he pushes the boys aside and decides to sell his own ink to make lots of money. In doing this, he reveals to everyone what they've actually been waiting in line for this entire time, which is a little disappointing. I'd imagine this is how people who bought a PS5 on release day felt when they waited 24 hours outside for a console with no games. Real talk though, Squidward just inks on everyone, which is as disturbing as you think it is. So then of course, everyone just rushes to his house and pukes all at once. Just why? Why did they do that? And that was the second most hated SpongeBob episode. Was it bad? Yep. It was. The writing is kind of annoying and repetitive. The narrative gets a little dark for no reason. Like, you know, I'm a 6-year-old. I just want to laugh. Why am I watching this? But I'll get more into that later, because now we have to jump into what a lot of people call the most hated SpongeBob episode of all time. This episode is called The Splinter. Half of you are curious why this episode is so bad. The other half are about to turn the video off. This episode starts with SpongeBob getting hype as hell to start work for the day. That's how you know this is a fictional story. We see him prepping everything in the kitchen so he can start cooking. This is ironic because the writers of this episode did not cook jack shit. The conflict happens when SpongeBob accidentally flings his spatula into the ceiling and it gets stuck there. Oh no. Since when is the roof so goddamn high in that building? What? To retrieve it, SpongeBob makes a single giant stack of things like boxes, tartar sauce, swords, you know, things you find in a kitchen. While trying to get the spatula unstuck, all the sharp things fall out and land with their sharp end up because, you know, of course they do. Eventually, however, SpongeBob gets his spatula free, but at the cost of falling down directly into the swords. I'm not even kidding. While he's falling to the floor, he straight up just closes his eyes and accepts his death. Yes, take me. It is over. Like, aren't you a sponge? I think you'll be fine, man. All right, check it. Sponge? Right here. Okay. Watch. It's still a sponge. Anyway, as luck would have it, SpongeBob, of course, just doesn't seem to die here. This is a really good representation of the franchise as a whole. But then, the mood changes when SpongeBob immediately slips on some sauce and is headed straight for the ground. Another disclaimer. Seriously this time. Okay, listen, I'm being serious. This next scene can be pretty disturbing for some people, especially for something in a silly cartoon. So if you get really queasy easily and you think you're gonna have a hard time, I've put a little tiny GIF at the bottom of your screen throughout this entire next section. Just stare at that. Okay, it'll help you through it. So like I said, SpongeBob trips. It's in slow motion and super epic. But wouldn't you know it, one of his thumbs lands perfectly in line with a thin piece of wood, which this episode loves to zoom in on and show entering his finger. The wood enters his finger, he gets a really bad splinter. This whole moment is like 4 seconds total, which if you don't think that's a long time, it's just long enough to be awkward. Anyway, so now SpongeBob has this disgusting splinter in his thumb. It's not that bad though, right? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Naturally, he tries to take it out, but I'm not kidding. Every time he tries, he screams of pain because it's so unpleasant. I just don't want to watch this. Okay. Eventually, SpongeBob just accepts his fate as the guy who has a splinter in his finger forever and just works through the pain. In the middle of this, we get a quick Squidward bit where he actually smiles since he's not the butt of the joke for once. I'm just gonna show it here because it makes me happy.
Looks like I'm crushing your face.
Eventually, Squidward thinks something's up, so he decides to go check in on SpongeBob, and of course, because this episode decided to be as gross as possible, when SpongeBob shows Squidward the splinter, it's now full of pus, and this weird slimy green goo is dripping out of it. Just look at the gif, guys, okay? The splinter isn't real. It can't hurt you. This splinter does give Squidward an idea, however. He realizes that he can screw with SpongeBob a bit by telling him the splinter is a work-related injury, so if Mr. Krabs finds out about it, he'll be forced to send him home. And then because SpongeBob loves working so much, this isn't a good thing for him, and he gets super scared and tries to hide the splinter from Mr. Krabs the entire episode. It's a fun time. You'd think it'd be very in character for Mr. Krabs not to care at all about his workers' injuries and to just force them to work anyway, but I guess not. Maybe he's gone soft. I don't know. SpongeBob is all sad and stuff now. There's this bit about how Mr. Krabs can sense when things are wrong with his nose, but it doesn't really involve anyone of note, and it was just another way to show off how cheap he is, really.
These quarters smell sad.
That's copper, actually. Anyway, SpongeBob really needs to get this splinter thing resolved ASAP or else he'll get sent home. So he calls who he thinks is the best doctor in all of Bikini Bottom, Patrick. Oh boy. There's this bit where Patrick puts SpongeBob's feet in his mouth. If I had any shred of optimism left in my life, this would probably be really funny. The splinter is really painful at this point, like SpongeBob's crying and stuff. So Patrick does what he's been hired to do and takes it out. How does he do this, you might ask? Well, check this silly little gif at the bottom of the screen, because he doesn't get the splinter out at all, but instead grabs a big wooden hammer and whacks it even further into the thumb. Jesus, why would you let this guy touch your body? Like, stay away from Patrick, always. If you see this man, run away. The thumb swells up a lot, and to fix it, Patrick grabs a bunch of rotten garbage from the bin and just plasters it onto the splinter. It's just, it's not pleasant. I don't know. It's gross. It's weird. Obviously, this doesn't fix it. It makes it a lot worse, and basically no one's happy. What a good episode so far. It turns blue and more goo comes out, so Patrick leaves, and then SpongeBob heads inside. When all of a sudden, Mr. Krabs is there waiting for him. SpongeBob is actually super scared now. He tries to hide his finger. The way he does it is kind of funny, I guess, but it drags on for a while, I won't lie. Eventually, he gives up and just shows the thing, and it's genuinely the worst thing I've seen in a very long time.
It was perfect. Perfect.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
The only thing that could have made this worse is if they did one of those hyper-realistic shots like they did earlier in the other episode. But thankfully, the animators just wanted to make this a little bit disgusting. Squidward faints because it's actually just really gross. Mr. Krabs just pulls out the splinter like it's nothing, which doesn't make any sense. And all the gross liquids inside SpongeBob's finger spray onto the floor. And now his finger is just better, I guess. All better. It's like nothing happened at all. The episode finishes when Mr. Krabs mentions workers' compensation, which is when you get paid whilst injured. Squidward overhears this and immediately bashes his own brains in with the cash register. Get it? That's us. But of course, he doesn't get any money though because his shift ended 2 minutes ago. How unfortunate. Had to make him the butt of the joke, at least one time. And that was the most hated SpongeBob episode ever, apparently. It's a lot easier to see why people hated this last one, in my opinion. It's just really gross, doesn't really go anywhere, it's not really funny, writing's bad. SpongeBob likes work, but he's got a huge splinter in his hand, doesn't really scream good idea, does it? And as for the first one, I found it less gross, but still weird, and torturing Squidward for a full 10 minutes is like never enjoyable, to be honest. And listen, I know there's gonna be a good chunk of people watching this that are like, well, I actually watched both of these episodes while eating food. I'm a manly person, I don't get grossed out by anything. And that's cool. I'm happy you enjoyed it. At least, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's just a cartoon, so enjoy it or don't. Doesn't matter. I'm just calling out what I think is bad writing and really weird artistic choices for a show marketed to 10-year-olds. That's my life now. That's what I'm doing. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the video a bunch. The more I grow, the more I can make these videos. Thank you to all my members on screen now. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you so much. Become a member if you want your name here at the end of my next video. Check out the playlist if you want more videos like this. Paula Abdul scores this one a solid 20 deadly swords out of 5. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Sorry, that's not included.
What is going on?